Going live. All right, I think this is up and running. And hopefully I got the sound and everything working. Yeah, live stream here at Twilight Apprentice. Today we're going to talk about a couple articles, specifically about Hollywood and some shill media sources making excuses for bad movies. A couple things. We're going to talk a little bit about Star Wars. Every time a new bad movie comes out, it seems like another reason to pull up the Disney sequel trilogies and why they did so poorly. All kinds of new excuses and reasons why those movies were so poorly received and kind of not beloved. Like most Star Wars stuff tends to be. And then the flavor of the day, which is James Bond. James Bond has been out for a while worldwide, but just kind of recently released in the US. So unless you've been living under a rock or super uninterested in anything entertainment related, probably have already heard about James Bond, and so I'm going to talk about spoilers and stuff. At this point, you know how to avoid spoilers, or you would have been spoiled already, and I'm not going to be careful about it. So if you don't want to hear spoilers for James Bond, which has been out for a month in parts of the world, or spoilers for Star Wars movies that have been out for years, click away. And if you're watching this live, now's your chance to do the same. So yeah, let's talk about a couple things. First and foremost, let's read. Let's move me over here. Let's read. Whoa, get bigger. Not nearly as big as Daniel Craig. Let's read this one. I think I'm going to read this one first, then just as a heads up, then we're going to read this one. Why the Star Wars sequels were always going to be disappointing. They just couldn't possibly have gotten it right. This article title caught my eye. It's like, oh, I got to read this. This has got to be good. Game Rant. Play on Screen Rant's probably owned by the same people. Not interested enough to look. But let's start with this one. Daniel Craig's James Bond movie shows where the Star Wars sequels went wrong. Interesting. Tech Radar. Tech companies talking about entertainment. Let's see what they had to say. Don't necessarily disagree with the title. And it's interesting that it actually is admitting that there was something wrong with the Star Wars sequels. Let's read this guy. Big No Time to Die spoilers to follow. Yeah, we're going to talk about all this stuff in this movie. They actually went and did it. ... For a franchise that's spent most of its 6 decades adhering to a strict formula, No Time to Die's final act was as bold as they come. Not only was perennial singleton James Bond on the verge of becoming a family man, he was unexpectedly and definitively killed off at the sharp end of a barrage of missiles. There's your big spoiler. If you stayed too long, sorry, we ruined the movie. This isn't how it's supposed to be. One of Hollywood's biggest certainties that 007 can and will walk out of any situation intact was instantly turned on its head. This was unfamiliar. Through the looking glass territory. I don't know if it's that big a deal. This was unfamiliar through the looking glass territory, and all the more exhilarating for it. Fan reaction seems to be a little different than all the more exhilarating for it, but let's go ahead. But perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised. Ever since Daniel Craig first ran through walls in Casino Royale, his tenure at MI6 has been characterized by a desire to work outside conventional mission parameters. Craig's 5 movies haven't always. That's an interesting sentence. conventional mission parameters. Um, that's trying to take the movie makers and the franchise directors' uh, changes to the way the stories were told and putting it on the character. I don't think James Bond, as a fictional character, had any real say in whether or not he worked in or outside the cliche or traditional tropes of James Bond movies. Um, so if the movie makers were messing with that formula, and if that has proved to not be the most profitable thing or the best thing for their franchise, foisting that decision making process off on the character seems a bit of a stretch. But oops, there we go. I don't know what I clicked over to, but that seems like an interesting article too. I mean, they did say ever since Daniel Craig first ran through Casino Walls. Um, so they're putting some of this on the actor. But again, same thing as you can't put it on James Bond. There's movie makers, there's decision makers that write the checks, that call these shots, and they're the one who bear the responsibility for the character or the actor working outside conventional mission parameters. Anyway, Craig's 5 movies haven't always hit the target. Yeah, that's definitely true. No Time to Die itself has several issues of its own, but a series of adventures, very un-Bond storytelling choices marks them out as a golden period in 007's lengthy service history. I don't know if history will bear out that this is a golden period. It's certainly the current period, so it has some recency bias there. Um, I don't seek out this kind of reporting or clickbaity articles, but it's almost hard to avoid the ranking who is the best Bond. It's just like same thing with Star Trek. Who is the best captain? You see these things pop up. It's not only even when every time a new Bond movie comes out, they're just kind of perennial top 10 lists. Top lists. I guess there's not 10 of them, but Sean Connery tends to top that list. And then there's every once in a while somebody will have a hot take. They really like Pierce Brosnan, one of the ever Bonds. Somebody's like me grew up with Roger Moore as the Bond that was in theaters when I was growing up. So even though I think Sean Connery for me is my favorite Bond, I know the plots and like the villains and stuff of the Roger Moore stuff better. And I'm not a huge Bond fan, but yeah. Anyway, these lists come up. I think Daniel Craig benefits from being the current James Bond. Casino Royale is a very cool movie, and you could see that they were. I think they were worried, right? We had Jason Bourne movies coming out. We had other options where Bond was kind of the go-to thriller spy movie franchise, and suddenly we had these gritty, grounded Bourne novels too, but Bourne movies, and I think Craig's take on or the Craig take. I don't know how much of that we can put on the actor himself, but the Craig take on Bond was a reaction to that. And other people have talked about how it's an allegory for the Dark Knight or Nolan films. I don't know about all that. Plenty of videos on that kind of stuff if you want to dive in. I'm not that big of a Bond fan, but I do want to see how this ties into the Star Wars movies. So let's read on. Yeah, Craig's 5 movies haven't always hit the target. No Time to Die itself has several issues of its own, but a series of adventures very un-Bond storytelling choices marks them out as a golden period in 007's lengthy service history. It's a stark contrast with Disney's Star Wars sequels, whose own inability to let the past die was ultimately their undoing. They've been undone. We've seen it here in print, folks. Even before Sean Connery hung up his Walther PPK for the official last time in 1971, thus ushering in Roger Moore, and me. The Bond movies were the opposite of Forrest Gump's famous box of chocolates. You always knew what you were going to get. Sure, there were subtle changes to the packaging, with new locations and stunts, and Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan taking different positions on a scale between brooding action hero and eyebrow raising archness. Eyebrow raising archness? I'm not even sure what that's supposed to mean. Um, Nonetheless, if you wanted a Bond movie between 1973 and 2002, and those movies did very well in that period, you nearly always knew what you were getting. Monologuing, megalomaniacal, unleashing a megalomaniac. Let me try that again. Monologuing, a megalomaniac unleashing a plan to kill millions or extort cash. Q showing off his latest sections of gadgets. 007 having brief relationships with a couple of women, one of whom would be dead by the end credits. A bombastic finale that may or may not take place in a spectacular lair. Those were awesome parts of Bond movies. I mean, we ran through them all, but it's like, yeah, hit me up with some of that. It was a rare Bond outing that didn't tick off most, if not all, of these touchstones. For many, the formulaic nature of 007 brand was part of its charm. Yeah, it was. That's a pretty good summary of why people loved Bond movies. I bet if they would have made that No Time to Die, probably would have done better in the US. I don't know about globally. It seems to be doing okay, but US was a little lackluster. And I guess we'll see this week if it did better or kind of stayed the course or fell off a cliff for its second week. I haven't been bothered to look. The Spy Who Loved Change. Excuse me. Casino Royale, however, showed that things didn't have to be that way. Oh, it's a paradigm shift, folks. A response to both the affectionate spy spoofery of the Austin Powers series. How do you create an old school Bond villain in a world where Dr. Evil exists? And the grittier action of Jason, yeah, this is the Jason Bourne stuff. It essentially functioned as a reboot, rebuilding the character from the ground up. With no Q, no Moneypenny, a rookie Bond, this was the beginning of a story arc that would continue over 5 blockbuster installments. Instead of being trapped in a time warp as the world changed around him, this Bond would evolve. In fact, the later Craig movies even acknowledged the fact he was getting older. Sometimes the series had even failed, something the series had even failed to do when 56-year-old Roger Moore creaked his way through A View to a Kill. Yeah, I didn't mind seeing the older takes on Bond. There's so much emphasis put on physique and physicality in movies these days. Like everyone in a Marvel film is in a muscle suit. A lot of the Bond I remember growing up with was masculine men solving problems, right? And that was done through both the implementation of science with the gadgets and tools that were made for him, and an accomplished man, Bond himself, putting those tools to use. It was a craftsman at work. And yes, he would get in a fight, he would take a beating, but at some point, and it probably has to do more with the technology available to filmmakers than it does with audiences' tastes. But we started to expect, these physical specimens to accomplish these amazing feats in films, like amazing, not in the real world sense, but in the hyperbolic, unbelievable sense. And that can be entertaining. It does get a little tired. Like you've seen one, like again, the Marvel films are a great example of this. You see this CGI light show at the end of a film. It can be quite impressive. You see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. If you were to see that film or The Matrix for the first time, the wow factors of those, it's why those films probably will endure as classics, and maybe not Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but certainly The Matrix, um, because they did it first, or at least they were the first recognition, mainstream recognition of pulling that stuff off. Now it's just part and parcel of almost any, I mean, CW shows, at least when they still tried, can put that kind of technology to use. But the yeah, the Craig aging, Bond aging with a franchise. I mean, I guess it was a choice, right? Instead of making individual Bond movies, they responded to the kind of ongoing sagas that everything from the Lethal Weapon movies to Marvel movies uh, did, is like, we want to continue a storyline. And that's fine. That was a choice. And humans age in the real world. For them to acknowledge that that Bond was aging, yeah, I mean, that was an artistic choice. I don't know if it's as commercial and as exciting for viewing audiences as getting the fun action flick every time. Um, but I, got to applaud their decision to try to link those stories together. Um, and it's been done. So hopefully now the owners of the franchise will review this and say, okay, moving forward, what do we want to do? I think take the pulse, right? Read the room. I think fun action movies are going to do better right now. We've been cooped up for years. People people are going back to the theaters. Box offices are showing that for fun movies, and every time they have a movie that doesn't do so well, like a Black Widow or whatever. Well, that was released online too, so everyone could just watch that at home. Um, but you see, like a Shang-Chi or something, people don't go for that, and they're like, oh, pandemic. But you see other movies like Fast 9. We were more deeply still in the pandemic then, and that thing killed. And those are complete brain candy. Suspend your disbelief, turn off your brain, eat some popcorn, and enjoy it. Movies. So anyway, I don't know if the series showing an aging James Bond is at all a detriment to the storytelling, because James Bond doesn't need to be a superhero. He's a spy with a small caliber handgun and cool gadgets that let him solve problems, right? Solves mysteries, and also, responds in physical conflicts too. But we've got superhero movies. We don't need Bond to be a low powered superhero. We'd rather have him be a badass spy. My take, anyway. Anyway, hopefully this will tie into Star Wars at some point. This 007 would have long-term relationships and emotional attachments. And when franchise regulars Q, Moneypenny, and Blofeld were eventually reintroduced, they'd been given 21st century makeovers. Oh, yay! Ironically, Brosnan's final outing in Die Another Day, one of the undoubted nadirs of the franchise, may have been the best thing that ever happened to it. The catalyst that forced rights holders Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson to look at their tuxedoed cash cow in a whole new light. Like Casino Royale, Disney's Star Wars sequel trilogy was, in part, a response to movies that had disappointed large sections of the audience. In this case, George Lucas's not as bad as people make out prequels. Lucasfilm's instinct was not to reinvent their long-running franchise, however, but to play safe by riffing on past glories. Kinda. The Force Awakens is undeniably a fun movie. I don't know about undeniably. A fun movie that effortlessly captures the spirit of that galaxy far, far away. Who couldn't relate to Han Solo's poignant "Chewie, we're home" aside? Oh, we're coming back to that. But when even Bond, rarely afraid of an in-joke or bringing an old Aston Martin out of storage, has realized that you can't sustain a franchise on fan service alone, sooner or later you have to stop being a tribute act. That means taking viewers somewhere they haven't been before, even if that place is slightly strange and disconcerting. Wow, there is so much that I disagree with in that paragraph. Yeah, I almost don't even know. Let's take it sentence by sentence. Force Awakens is undeniable. Man, we'll have to take it. We'll have to take each sentence part by part. Force Awakens is undeniably a fun movie. I think Abrams tried to make a fun movie. Um, I would say that the thing the Force Awakens does best is thoughtful and beautiful rather than fun. The introduction of Rey, I I will hold to this, and I will happily debate the biggest sequel trilogy apologist or the hugest sequel trilogy hater that the introduction of Rey as a character was beautifully done. Maybe one of the best character character beginnings that we've seen in the franchise period, live action, animation, anything. The scenes with her, and I don't, well, no, she's unmasked through part of it. You don't even know who or what she is at the beginning of her introduction, but there's a story beautifully told. It would make a wonderful short, in fact, of Ray in the um, exploring the old ship, moving, finding little pieces, cleaning them off, even preparing her food, even her going into the town and the first interactions that she has, hawking the junk she's salvaged to eat. That is all beautifully done. I would even say the point where she meets Finn and um, there's accusations thrown by people who hate the movies about she starts pulling away from Finn. Stop touching me. That that's just a girl power moment. You know, both as a man and as a father and as just a human being. Like I would hope that if some strange man, um, armed man, you know, with I don't know if Finn obviously has military training at that point, but it almost doesn't matter. If some strange man comes and starts grabbing your hand and trying to pull you somewhere, I would hope that you would pull away and say, "Stop touching me." Um, so I don't see that as a girl power. I don't need a man's help kind of thing. Maybe that's how the writers intended it. That's I think just good writing. That's how a human would react in that kind of situation. So all through that, Ray's introduction is superb storytelling, I think. It's the moment they get in the Millennium Falcon and she starts to fly, having never flown before, and goes full stop from there. There's nothing that character can't do. There's nothing that character can't accomplish. There's no one that questions them. There's no one that doubts them. There's no one that dislikes them. From that moment on, all of that beautiful setup is trashed. So I wouldn't say The Force Awakens is an undeniably fun movie. At its best, during its setup and in that beginning, and I know Poe does some really dumb stuff in the very very beginning of the movie, but at least for the introduction of Rey, who's undeniably the story in those three movies, it's the Rey story. Her introduction was fantastic, and then they just utterly wasted it. So no, I wouldn't say The Force Awakens is undeniably a fun movie. It gets slapstick and stupid when it starts trying to have fun, um, and ultimately kind of boring toward the end. That effortlessly captures the spirit of that galaxy far, far away. Visually, I think it was beautiful. So it captured the image of Star Wars. I don't think it at all captured the spirit. I'm not going to talk about Han, Chewie, we're home. Like that was a feel good moment in the trailer. I don't think it should have made it into the movie. It was great for the trailer. Like that was good hype, but it was so coincidental and oh, what amazing timing in the movie. It was more like eye rolling, unbelievable than it was, emotional or poignant. Anyway, Man, this paragraph. But when even Bond, rarely afraid of an in-joke or bringing old Aston Martin out of storage, yeah, those are two things he does, has realized that you can't sustain a franchise on fan service alone. So it's trying to say that the character has realized that you can't sustain a franchise. This is, uh, I don't know. I've written a lot for money. Um, and I've written sentences like this because I want to drive home the point that the point here is you can't sustain a franchise on fan service, and you're trying to build the character of Bond, the beloved character that has endured for generations, really for decades. Even that character knows that you can't sustain a franchise on fan service. No, that's not true. That character doesn't know anything that the writer hasn't told them to know in the story. Um, so there's the call to the character, some fun things that the character does, and then a point that's utterly unrelated and can't even be held by a fictional character. Sooner or later, you have to stop being a tribute act. No, there's a reason that tribute bands are so popular. People want the original thing. People want, once you've had vanilla ice cream, if you like vanilla ice cream, you're still going to be happy having vanilla ice cream. Is it going to be like your first time? No, you're not going to have that magical first time. You're still going to want it after dinner, or for some of us for breakfast. Can't admit that. Yeah. Bond has realized you can't sustain a franchise on fan service alone. I think Ghostbusters coming out this fall is going to disprove that statement. I think there are a lot of fans, and fans pay, and fans want to be serviced, and they want to be serviced with good storytelling. They want more stories just like the ones that they loved. Yeah. That means taking viewers somewhere they haven't been before, even if that place is slightly strange and disconcerting. So I'm spending way, way more time on this paragraph than I wanted to. That means taking viewers somewhere they haven't been before, even if that place is slightly strange and disconcerting. No, I don't think that's what that means. I think some filmmakers want to take audiences somewhere audiences don't want to go, and from an audience's perspective, best case scenario, they're upfront about that in their marketing, and then the viewers can choose to go or not. What we're commonly seeing now is they're disingenuous about it in their marketing. They're promising the thing that the customers loved before and would love to have again, and are disappointed about, and sometimes verbally or on social media upset about the bait and switch when they leave, having been taken somewhere slightly strange or disconcerting. So yeah, you might make money in the moment by being deceptive there, but we're seeing how that plays out in the long run. We're seeing that in the form of dollars. Okay, we're finally getting to it. Here's Star Wars stuff. The Fall of Skywalker. The Last Jedi did, at least, give it a good go. I don't know about that. It did give it a go. Ryan Johnson's episode 8 may have proved divisive among you think among the fan base, but in many ways it was what the franchise needed after the nostalgia fest of its predecessor. No, The Force Awakens was a poorly made movie. And to say that destroying core tenets of a beloved franchise was a necessary response to a poorly made movie, I think is remarkably, it's not even naive, it's mistaken. Yeah, if you love movies like Knives Out, Ryan Johnson's a great filmmaker for you. Um, Ryan Johnson was a casting mistake as director for what Star Wars, from a financial perspective, what Star Wars should have been trying to accomplish. And no, I don't think it's at all what the franchise needed after, you can call The Force Awakens a nostalgia fest. I think The Force Awakens was a bad movie for a lot of reasons. Um, and nostalgia baiting is on the list. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't at all agree that The Last Jedi was the unavoidable next step to what The Force Awakens did or didn't accomplish. Um, from casually killing off Emperor Substitute Supreme Leader Snoke, turning the wonderfully petulant Kylo Ren into the big bad, and they turned him into the small bad. Petulant is exactly the right word. To establishing that Rey's family tree was actually nothing special, writer-director Ryan Johnson did everything he could to wrong-foot his audience. Not everything worked. Leia's impersonation of a space angel still feels clunky, which is true, but doesn't excuse all the other missteps. But at least the movie wasn't falling back on tropes established a long time ago. That would have made money if it fell back on tropes established a long time ago. Maybe it wouldn't have been popular with angry people on Twitter, but would have made money. Unfortunately, saga closer The Rise of Skywalker undid any good work that had come before it. Indeed, it gets worse every time you watch it. Johnson had set up J.J. Abrams' trilogy closer with an intriguing cliffhanger that the resistance cut back to its barest bones. It calls for help unanswered as it waged war against a First Order led by a guy with the emotional intelligence of a teenager. But this was the perfect opportunity to give Star Wars its own Bond has a kid twist. But the movie lacked the courage to do anything quite so radical. Wow. Okay, I think it is an admirable thing to have enough faith in any filmmaker to pull off a third movie that fixed what The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi set up as a trilogy. Yeah, that whole trilogy is a bizarre stream of conscience Star Wars blob. It is so disjointed. So talk about disconcerting. That was a word used in this article. It's hard to watch, right? So yeah, it is a tall order to say that, okay, we're going to take one movie and we're going to repair everything. I think with Rise of Skywalker, they were just trying to make the most action-packed uh, uh, set piece movie they could, trying as much as possible to ignore everything that the first two movies had set up. Yeah, I'm not even going to talk about this paragraph anymore because I think it's almost ludicrous to think that any movie titled Rise of Skywalker, any movie that came after those first two sequel trilogy movies could fix what they had done. Maybe. I mean, some writers up to the challenge. Go nuts. I don't even think they tried with Rise of Skywalker. So, yeah, of course they didn't because I don't think they tried. Suddenly, a cackling Emperor Palpatine, killed off 3 decades previously in Return of the Jedi, was back to pull the strings as Rey learned she was actually his granddaughter. It's like a daytime drama here. So much for undoing the idea of the fate of that galaxy far, far away rested. So much for undoing the idea that the fate of the galaxy far, far away rested on a couple of famous bloodlines. What does that mean? That sentence doesn't even make any sense. So much for undoing the idea that the fate of that galaxy far, far away rested on a couple of famous bloodlines. Uh, oh, I guess they're talking about Ryan Johnson saying Ray is from nowhere, no one's special. Okay, all right, yeah, fair enough. Turns out two dumb ideas don't make a good one. Um, as well as shamelessly retconning what we thought we'd learned in The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker cheapened everything that had come. This is very true. Skywalker cheapened everything that had come before with the fake out non demise of Chewbacca and C3PO. Um, yeah, that's not where I thought they were going with this. Uh, Retconning what we thought we'd learn in The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker cheapened everything that come before. I thought they were going to talk about Palpatine and basically invalidating the first 6 movies. Nothing was accomplished in them if the Emperor was still there, and better than ever apparently. Yeah, he didn't have Coruscant, but who cares? He had an overwhelming force and more than he'd ever had before. And was apparently immortal because he was capable of cloning himself over and over as many times as he wants. That's where I thought they were going. Let's see where they actually go. The Rise of Skywalker cheapened everything that had come before with the fake out non-demise of Chewbacca and C-3PO, emotionally manipulative shocks with zero consequences. Yeah, it's hard to tell a good story when your plot points have no consequence. Maybe Abrams felt that with the original triumvirate of Han, Luke, and Leia gone, having never been seen together in any of those films, by the way, audiences would revolt at the loss of another classic hero. But if your characters are never in any peril, you're always going to revert to the status quo, and sooner or later your franchise will hit a dead end. Yeah, that is very true. If Bond, the most immortal mortal man who ever lived, can die, there are clearly few limits on where a franchise can go. Being bold isn't a guarantee of success, of course, but it's hard to imagine how the riskier approach of No Time to Die could have made the Rise of Skywalker any worse. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Whatever 007's identity next time he or she stares down that famous gun barrel, one thing is certain: James Bond will return. All right, so this is basically just a fluff piece for the Bond franchise. And a backhanded way to slap J.J. Abrams and Disney's Rise of Skywalker for not being more bold, I guess. Yeah, I don't think Rise of Skywalker needed bold choices. Rise of Skywalker needed to be a good movie and a good trilogy. And it was I think what they thought was a safe movie in an absolute cluster. Try to keep it PG for YouTube. Yeah, so who wrote this? Tech Radar, Richard Edwards. Yeah, I think if I were Mr. Edwards, a editor, I probably would have tightened up on some of the writing, but a well written article. Good job. And I guess a worthy attempt to try to tie the challenges around that have been leveled at the No Time to Die with some of the talked to death challenges of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Let me get back to me. I don't know if I agree with the premise of this article, though, that the thing The Last Jedi needed was, the thing that Rise of Skywalker needed was to do something bold, to really, up the level of drama or controversy set up with, the character assassinations that occurred in The Last Jedi. To double down or triple down on that to make Rise of Skywalker to take that from the failure it was to a success. Especially since they switched editors, not last minute, but kind of late in the game for the Rise of Skywalker. It was just a bad movie. They needed to make a different movie. Like, how do you deal with that as a writer? You've got a dumb first movie, a second movie that was intentionally bad, and then you're supposed as a writer, you're supposed to take those two things and write a satisfying conclusion for lifelong fans of a different thing, right? Yeah, it's got all the same colors, right? It tries to use some of the same vocabulary, but at its heart, at its core, it's nothing at all like Lucas's Star Wars. It's nothing at all like the continuations of that universe in things like Clone Wars. Like they nailed it with Rebels. Um, it, I think they not only nailed it, but they killed it with Rogue One. Um, so clearly Disney was capable of that. I guess J.J. Abrams wasn't, but as a company, Disney is capable of fantastic storytelling. Um, like my daughter's favorite movie by far is the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and she will fight you if you don't like it. Um, and that will likely be a story that endures far beyond my generation, perhaps far beyond hers. Um, I I have a feeling she's going to enjoy showing that movie to her children someday as much as my father enjoyed sharing Bond films with me, or my mom enjoyed sharing, Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye uh, black and white movies with me. Great storytelling, by the way, in some of those old musicals. But yeah, to say that the thing that Rise of Skywalker missed was the thing that No Time to Die did well, um, kind of presupposes that No Time to Die was a success, and maybe it was. Maybe it succeeded in what it was trying to accomplish, but I don't know if it succeeded in. I don't know if it's going to be looked back on as a success with the fans and a financial success for the movie makers. Um, it's been talked about, and I don't know the numbers, but apparently because of pandemic concerns, it's been pushed back, and just has no hope of making back the money that was invested into it, and with interest payments and stuff because it sat on the shelf for a couple of years. So I don't think it's going to be a financial success one way or the other. But critically looking back, I think it's going to be forgotten. Daniel Craig, I think, is the best James Bond because he's the James Bond right now. I think wherever they go next, I think when people look back with some distance, with a critical lens that time affords, he'll probably be kind of like Pierce Brosnan level. Like maybe you'll like him better than Timothy Dalton, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll like Roger Moore a little bit better, or maybe you won't. Probably just because the storylines are more classic and they're just more fun to watch. Like, truth be told, I checked out on Bond. I can't even remember which one it was. The one where they go to like the old mansion and there's somebody hunting him and Judy Dench. It's just boring. It was not a fun movie. It was like dark and sad, and nobody was happy. Casino Royale was fun. It was fun to see like James Bond parkouring through a movie, but that's about it. I'm gonna mute 1 second. All right, I'm back. Package delivered. That's good content right there. Dude on YouTube just walked away and the screen was black. Greatest live show ever. Yeah, anyway, that's enough beating up on James Bond. Yeah, it's just not fun to watch a dour, disheartened, disinterested character, right? It's like he hated being James Bond. And that's not the Bond I remember growing up with, which who cares, right? I'm not making the movie just for me. But it's not a very fun Bond to watch. And I think a lot of people are going to share that view. I think people just want fun movies. Anyway, enough on that. This article, let's pull this guy up. Leave me over here. Why the Star Wars sequels were always going to be disappointing. All right, this is from Game Rant. Barrett Edwards Smith. The sequels may be the most controversial Star Wars movies ever made. Yeah, you think? But there's one specific reason. You know what? I can't even get through the first sentence. Yeah, Captain Rex. Thanks for your comment on the other video. I hope you get your Captain Rex soon, bud. I love your name too, Captain Rex. It's almost at a point where when it comes to Star Wars, I'm more interested in the fan films people are making than some of the actual Lucas and Disney content. Yeah. Some of the fan film stuff is a little hard to watch, but some of it's amazing. That cosplayer Ray Kennex, who is an Ahsoka cosplay. Oh, she does a lot of cosplay. Her Hera was insanely cool. The Fulcrum thing she did, I was watching the trailer for that, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. They're going to make the whole movie about this. And it turns out the movie they were making was the trailer. I got to applaud them for putting that much effort into it. But it got me all excited. It's like, I would love to see a fan-made like feature-length film about that. That would have been super sweet. And the Bucketheads one that came out a few months ago, that was fantastic. I hope that team does well and they do more of that. But man, I'm actually more hopeful on Star Wars than I think a lot of people. Disney has made some of my favorite Star Wars ever, and having grown up with the franchise, I have a lot of my old classic toys. I have old GI Joe stuff. I have old Fisher Price stuff. I have old He-Man stuff. What I don't have anymore is very many at all of my old Star Wars toys. It's because I played them to death. Those didn't get sold. They didn't get like auctioned off on eBay. Those got thrown away because they were trashed. I played with them till the paint was gone and the arms and legs fell off. Like I had Star Wars sheets. You know, my extended family would make Star Wars pottery things for me for birthdays and stuff. And so I was a huge fan, and I was fans of other stuff even more. I guess I've just been a good consumer fan all my life. Like I loved ElfQuest and Asterix and Obelix and Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlance, and I love that stuff probably even more than I love Star Wars. But as much as that was important for me and a big deal for me, some of the recent stuff is like Rogue One is amazing. The Mandalorian is it is a serialized Western essentially. And I've had friends make the argument that, serialized Westerns died on television for a reason. Nobody wants to watch them. I think that may have been true, but I don't think it's true anymore. Like maybe things are just cyclical enough that is what audiences are hungry for now. And yeah, sure, it's kind of quest of the week, right? Almost MMO style. Like go to the whatever NPC is at the town you just rolled into. Whoever's got a question mark over their head, you accept their quest and go run the chore they assign you. But it was fun. It was just fun to watch. So Disney's given us that. They've given us Rogue One, like I mentioned. They've given us Rebels, which admittedly started a little slow. It was a little rough, like most of their animation is, or their animated shows, I should say. They gave us season 7 Clone Wars, and that was 8 of 12 of those episodes were some of the best Star Wars ever made. Maybe the first 4, the Bad Batch arc, was maybe a little more hit or miss for some people, but the fact that they went and got Echo, like, I love those 4 episodes. The Martez sisters, kind of, I see why Disney put them in there, right? They had to tick those boxes. But the Siege of Mandalore, I think if the Siege of Mandalore was, those 4 episodes were put together as a feature film, they might stand up as the best Star Wars movie ever made. It was that good. Now, you kind of have to be a Clone Wars fan and be familiar with Rex, be familiar with Ahsoka, Anakin's path outside of the live action movies to follow along with it. And let's be honest, most Star Wars fans even don't have that kind of context. You got to get through 6 seasons of Clone Wars to really have the emotional impact of that show, of those episodes. And for me, they were there, and Disney gave me that. Yeah, absolutely. Mando is great. Clone Wars and the other animated shows get better as they go. Yeah, they definitely do. And I'm hoping we'll see that with Bad Batch too. I think Bad Batch started pretty good, actually, compared to like the Clone Wars or Resistance. Never got there. That was just terrible. But yeah, if Disney's animated stuff has a tendency to start poorly, and I think it does, their Star Wars stuff, I should say, how good can Bad Batch get? Because I think their poor start is pretty good comparatively. But yeah, animated shows get better as they go. I'm still in. Been a fan since Sonic. Wow, Betamax. Damn, dude. Back in the day. Yeah, I agreed on the Mandalore arc. The Siege of Mandalore was just amazing Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, so many moments in that. I'm rewatching Clone Wars right now with my daughter, and things are starting to get good. We're coming up on the Umbara arc, which is really good storytelling. I almost can't believe they got away with that war story in a cartoon. Yeah, one of your favorites, mine too. So we're getting close to that, and then it's all gas, no brakes from that point on. Clone Wars just gets better and better and better. Even if you don't like the droid arc and stuff, there's some slower parts, but I love them all. And then we get to that we get to that 7th season, so looking forward to that. So let's read this thing. Why Star Wars sequels are always going to be disappointing. I 100% don't agree with this title. I think they could have made good movies. It's been demonstrated they can make good Star Wars. They just didn't in this case. But let's see. Let's give Barrett Edward Smith the benefit of a doubt here. Star Wars is undoubtedly one of the most iconic series in all of pop culture, with a history that stretches back decades. But throughout that history, the franchise has had no shortage of entries that have sparked controversy among fans. Fair enough. From the much maligned prequel trilogies to the infamous oh yeah, forgot the holiday special. The infamous holiday special. Star Wars has been upsetting its fans for almost as long as it's existed. But in recent years, the series' biggest punching bag has been the sequel trilogy, consisting of blah blah blah. Many fans see merit in the sequels despite their reputation, while many more see them as a blight upon the franchise that would be best wiped from canon. But regardless of quality, this kind of polarizing reception to the sequel trilogy has been inevitable from the beginning. All right, that's the premise I'm not sure I agree with, but let's see where this goes. Obviously, any new entry in Star Wars canon is going to be under plenty of scrutiny no matter what. The series has one of the biggest fandoms in the world, which means that no story will be able to please everyone. Fair enough. But a direct canon continuation of the original trilogy on the big screen, something that the fans thought impossible for decades, is something that would always be doomed to disappoint no matter what. And in this case, the problem lies not only with the fan base, but with an inherent flaw in the very premise of the sequel trilogy. All right, I disagree with this paragraph completely for one reason. That's the expanded universe. But let's see where they go, because I would have to bet that this author hasn't read Star Wars novels, right? And they don't have to. If they're talking about movies, it's very different. Uh, Having written novels, if you have something like a painting or a video, like, hey, can you take a look at this? Somebody takes a look at it for a few moments rather, or in the case of a movie, a couple hours, and they can comment on it. I liked it. I didn't like it. It was great. You give them a novel, you're asking for somebody to spend hours, depending on the novel and depending on the pace they read, maybe weeks of their time before they can give you any kind of feedback. So has this author read the extended universe? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. But the Thrawn trilogy, just to take like the most meat and potatoes, commonplace extended universe novels, showed us that you could very successfully tell fantastic stories that continued the Star Wars universe after the culmination of the defeat of the Emperor, right? Return of the Jedi wrapped up all the plot lines very well. Everybody got their Hollywood happy ending. Maybe not a happy ending, but a resolution to their arcs. But it didn't necessarily mean that any story that followed would fail. So I think so. Let's see what this guy says. Guy or gal? Can't remember. What is it? Barrett. I don't know if Barrett's a male or female name, but let's see where they go. Where was I? Originally, Return of the Jedi was intended as the grand finale of the entire Star Wars saga, and its story was written to reflect this. It's the perfect culmination of every character's development. Yeah, we were just talking about this. Han proves himself as a true hero. Leia discovers she still has family. Cool point. I haven't heard this talked about. Yeah, I mean, Leia is struggling with having seen her planet destroyed, with everyone she knew and loved presumably on it. We know, if you read books from the extended universe, you know that there were people not on planet that she cares for deeply that survived, but just taking the movies, everything she knows and loves has been utterly destroyed, like the entire planet gone. So that's a good point. Leia discovers she still has family, and Luke holds on to hope and overcomes the dark side, becoming a true Jedi in the process. I would argue that point, but that's some deep nerdery for another video. And of course, Darth Vader chooses his family over his master, destroying Emperor Palpatine, or so we thought, and taking his last breaths as Anakin Skywalker once again. Even Lando gets to pilot the Millennium Falcon one more time. Regardless of how you feel about the Ewoks or the Jabba Palace segment, Return of the Jedi is a perfect ending to the original trilogy. I agree with that. In every way that counts. It ties together every theme and character arc that's been building up throughout the series to provide a cathartic, fitting conclusion for the story. Yeah, I agree with all that. Every word. The final scene may not show how the Empire is dismantled or whether Luke starts a new Jedi Order, but it shows everything that matters. The heroes of the rebellion celebrate their hard-fought victory, and after bringing an end to the Empire's reign, the whole galaxy is looking to the skies with hope. The lost heroes of the past watch over their successors with pride. The war that began with a battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan is finally over, allowing the fallen brothers to rest at long last. It's a happy ending of the best kind, touching, heartfelt, and well-earned. But of course, this is no longer the true ending of the Skywalker saga. That was such a well, I love this paragraph, and then they spoil it with reminding me where we go. Darn you, Barrett. After all, the mere existence of the sequel trilogy that continues the story of the rebellion and the Empire means that by necessity, the ending of Return of the Jedi can no longer function within canon as the definitive ending it was meant to be. The story isn't over as it seemed, which robs the conclusion of the original trilogy and some of its thematic weight. After all, what good is a happy ending if the story keeps going afterward? Yeah. Okay. So let's just take the movies, right? Let's forget the extended universe exists. Let's forget fan fiction exists. Let's forget hypothetical theories of geeks like me talking about this stuff exist. And that we're on Endor. The Emperor is dead. Darth Vader is redeemed. And we fade to black. We fade to credits. Yeah. Can that story be continued? I want to say, obviously, yes, because of all those things we can't consider. But this is asking us to believe that nobody could come back and tell more of that story. If that's the case, Disney paid billions to get this franchise. And if the answer is that there is no way to continue that story without cheapening the conclusion at Return of the Jedi, what possible thought process could have led Disney to continuing the Skywalker saga? Obviously, we can have stories outside. It's a galaxy, right? It's a universe. Obviously, we can have stories outside of the Skywalker saga. We can even have Force users that have no relation to Jedi or to Sith, right? The Force is universal. The religions of Sith and Jedi are not, right? So we see this in visions, right? There's stories that can be told that don't involve Jedi or Sith at all, although most Visions did. But so what possibly could have led the studio to continuing that story if there was no possible way that moving forward could be done without cheapening or invalidating that resolution? I don't buy that. I think good writing, good storytelling, which Disney is capable of, could have easily continued that saga, but they didn't. They told those stories very poorly. Bad stories poorly told, yes, that will cheapen the dramatic conclusion of 6 very successful films. But let's keep going. And therein lies the problem with creating a sequel trilogy to begin with. Luke, Leia, and Han already got the perfect ending to their story, so bringing them back for more would only do more harm than good. At best, any new story that could be told with them wouldn't be able to live up to the original trilogy, and at worst, it would actively undermine the story of the previous films. And sure enough, plenty of Star Wars fans weren't happy with how the sequel trilogy dealt with the legacy of the previous films. Yeah, it's true. This last sentence here. Sure enough, plenty of Star Wars fans weren't happy with how the sequel trilogy dealt with the legacy of the previous films. Yes, I think plenty of fans weren't happy with how that legacy was dealt with. But I don't buy that because of that, nothing that could have been done would have been well received. We know we have demonstrable proof in print that there are great stories to be told, not only including but focused on those characters continuing after that resolution and honoring that resolution. But I think what happened was Disney didn't. What they did instead was they told really bad stories, and they tried to leverage the presence of those beloved characters to prop up a failed attempt. And I guess they were in a hurry, right? They couldn't wait to do something better. What a shame. What a waste. While some fans found Han's death to be appropriately shocking and tragic moment, others were disappointed that he died before he could reunite with Luke. And of course, Luke himself proved to be even more polarizing figure in The Last Jedi. Many moviegoers were furious at seeing the once great Jedi Knight reduced to a bitter shell of a man due to very fear and impulsiveness he had conquered back in the original trilogy. Yeah, what a huge step back for him. Who would have thought? Certainly not anyone who actually enjoyed and cared about the path he took in those first three movies, huh? Still bitter. Meanwhile, some considered his send-off a fitting one, with the hero of the old generation dying peacefully after passing the torch to his successor. While Leia's time in the trilogy was sadly cut short by Carrie Fisher's untimely passing, fans remain divided on how satisfying her exiting role in the story is. That's kind to say. Fans remain divided. And then, of course, there's the matter of the Emperor. Although Palpatine was thought gone after Anakin sacrificed his life to destroy him, basically the culmination of 6 films and 7 seasons of the Clone Wars that Disney paid $4 billion for, flushed with that decision. Anyway, he was revealed to be alive and well in the Rise of Skywalker, though through conspicuously ambiguous means, manipulating the events of the sequel trilogy from the shadows. At first, some fans were excited to see the ultimate villain of Star Wars. I think the ultimate villain of Star Wars is going to end up being J.J. Abrams. Good Lord. Or maybe Kathleen Kennedy if you go that route. But in practice, Palpatine's big comeback proved to be quite problematic for a number of reasons. Oh, do tell. Putting aside how Palpatine was actually written in the film, the very fact that he returned renders Anakin's sacrifice all but completely meaningless. Not all but completely meaningless. It renders it completely meaningless. Have some conviction in what you write. Jeez. Yeah, take all but out of there. It renders Anakin's sacrifice completely meaningless. It is. It renders Luke's sacrifice completely meaningless. Not the sacrifice in The Last Jedi, but the sacrifices he made in Empire Strikes Back, in Return of the Jedi. It's still a perfect ending of his character arc. Well, let's back up. Putting aside how Palpatine was actually written in the film, the very fact that he returned renders Anakin's sacrifice all but completely meaningless. It's still a perfect ending of his character arc. So, okay, yeah. Anakin's sacrifice is a perfect ending of his character arc. But the fact that his betrayal of the Emperor has no lasting consequence definitely gives the moment much less weight if one watches Return of the Jedi with the sequel trilogy in mind. Yeah, and this is something the other article brought up as well, is those filmmakers, and Disney let them get away with this, they were perfectly happy to use poor cinematography to show that there was one ship in view. Chewie was loaded onto a ship took off, and Rey blew it up, killing Chewie. Oh, but just so happens there were 2 ships, and even though they're in a flat desert, and the one terrain feature that is there, they had people on. Like, so even looking from elevation, we just didn't see the second ship. And that's the one Chewie's actually on, so he's totally still alive. They were willing to do that. They were willing to set up this whole thing like 3PO, who droids' memories get wiped all the time in the Star Wars universe, but it was set up as this big traumatic moment that he may not ever recover from this. Lo and behold, he does. He did the exact same thing with Palpatine. And unfortunately, instead of sacrificing a few minutes in a bad movie, they sacrificed the whole culmination of the whole franchise that they paid billions for. They bought all of that fan goodwill, and they let that movie maker flush it with that decision. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap this thing up. And I'm out of coffee, so I'm going to wrap the stream up here soon too. In fact, the entire story of the original trilogy suffers because of Palpatine's unexplained revival. Despite everything, and I'm going to pause again here, because not only does it the entire original trilogy suffer because of this, everything, not everything, the post Return of the Jedi series that they're doing right now. So Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Rangers of the Republic, if they make it. I think there's another one in there. Book of Boba Fett. I think there's one I'm forgetting. Those, if they, sunk cost fallacy, if they are like, we have so much invested in the parks, in these movies, in our new trilogy characters, that we have to use the live action stuff we're making now to try to save them. Not only does that Palpatine decision invalidate what they paid so much money from the original trilogy, um, and everything surrounding it, they might still, if they double down on this mistake, they might sacrifice everything they're writing in the future. Just an incredibly expensive mistake. Anyway, despite everything the rebellion does to take down the Empire, despite all the sacrifices the heroes make, their efforts are rendered meaningless in the long run. After all, the galaxy only knows peace for a few years before the Empire returns in the form of the First Order, with the Emperor himself still pulling the strings. Nothing truly changed at all over the course of 30 years, and Han, Luke, and Leia all end up dying because of it. The once optimistic ending of episode 6 is rendered downright grim in hindsight, knowing all the tragedy that's still to come. Yeah. Yeah. Great couple of sentences there. Regardless of one's personal thoughts on the quality of the sequel trilogy, it's hard to deny that the story of the original trilogy suffers a bit when it loses its sense of closure and finality. The endings that were originally intended for Luke, Leia, Han, and the Emperor work much better thematically than the ones we have now, which raises the question of whether a direct sequel to the original trilogy could ever work at all. While other entries in the Star Wars canon, like Rogue One, Rebels, and The Mandalorian, have been, hey, that's the ones I listed, have been welcome additions, the controversy caused by the sequels far outweighs their merit. Perhaps this was one story better left untold. Yeah. I know for a fact that I could talk about this just about for forever, because I frequently do talk about this a lot with friends and stuff. We talk a lot about how things could have been. I think part of the problem here was these movies were made when they were made. Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford were not young when Disney bought the franchise and wanted to make more movies. And they paid so much for this franchise. They wanted to use those characters because they wanted audiences to go to their movies. And they wanted to use the same actors for the exact same reason. And if you were going to tell a post Return of the Jedi story, and right, there's overlapping circles of requirements here. So in the Venn diagram that has Disney's decision making, you have Star Wars and you have canon. You have original characters and they have a place in canon story, and you have original actors and they are bound by the real physical world, right? So to incorporate all of those aspects into your new movie, it puts you at a certain chronological time. And they decided that it was important for them to use the original cast. I think they wasted that opportunity. They never put them in a scene together. What a terrible way for Han and Leia's romance to end. Ugh, that was awful. There's a lot of content out there about all the bad decisions made with the relationships of those characters. So I don't need to rehash that. But the reality is that when they made the decision to use the original actors, it put them in a certain place in time. And it meant they couldn't use a lot of the extended universe story, right? You can't use a 50-something-year-old Mark Hamill to tell the Heir to the Empire and the Thrawn trilogy stories. He's too old for it. So they didn't want to recast. They wanted to cash in on the original cast and probably paid through the nose to do it. And as a result, they had to come up with a new story. And they didn't do the work to do that well. Period. Period. They didn't do the hard work of making good stories. Um, and and that sucks. And that was expensive. All they can do now is either commit to that and continue down a bad path or make different decisions. And I know what I want. I just want really, really good Star Wars stuff. So there's a galaxy of places they can go and tell cool stories. They even have a lot of um, really good storytelling in novel form that they could adapt and retell, or they could just write more good stuff. But take the temperature of the audience, right? Take the temperature of the people, and not the angry freaks on either side of a political spectrum on Twitter who are yelling at you. The people who actually like, pay to take their families to movies and pay to take their families to theme parks and buy themed merchandise for birthdays and for Christmas. Like, take the temperature of those people and what kind of stories do they want? Not what story, because when you ask people what story they want to hear, most people are bad storytellers, right? And they're going to give you bad advice. But what kinds of stories they want? Um, Take the temperature on that. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you had asked somebody if they wanted a serialized Western, essentially like The Mandalorian, they probably would have said no. But I think people are hungry for that right now. Um, I think people are hungry for good dad stories. If you look at, again, look at the success of The Mandalorian and specifically the success of Grogu, that's based off one, he's adorable, right? And they knew that. Big heads, big eyes. He's basically like um, a Funko Pop character in real life. Um, but it's the emotional tie he has to a dad, right? There is a parentless child who is cared for by a man trying to do his best. Um, what a wonderful story. And apparently people are hungry for that. So I'm going to leave it there. I had a couple other things I want to talk about. I might do a whole live stream on a couple things that crossed my mind. Because it's too much to talk about in the course of these articles, but they got me thinking about a few things that I thought about before and recurred to me. So I might do a live stream on that later today or tomorrow. Depends on if I got time. But anyway, Captain Wrecked rather. Thank you for the comments. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great day. I'm gonna go make some coffee. Bye.